GoForThe2.com. This is our Week 6 breakdown of a great matchup Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. It's on NBC. It's the Miami Hurricanes taking on the 9th-ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It's going to be a great matchup, and we're going to break it down for you right now. Let's just talk about this game in a little more detail. This game is going to be played at Soldier Field, so it's a neutral game site. No team is really the home team heading into this game. It's going to be cold. It's going to be windy. Wind chill could be a little bit of a factor coming into this game, so keep an eye out. The low for at least tonight in Chicago is 31 degrees, so keep an eye out for that heading into this matchup. How does the cold weather and the wind coming off the Great Lakes affect the passing game for both teams? Miami's 4-1. They've beaten up on 3 ACC opponents, both Boston College, Georgia Tech, and NC State. They're 3-0 in the ACC. Notre Dame is 4-0. They're ranked 9th in the country. They are 3-0 over the Big Ten. They beat up on Purdue, Michigan, and Michigan State. So now they both take an interconference matchup. How is this going to fare for both teams? We're going to have to see. Let's get into Miami right now and talk about them. They're surrendering about 33.4 points per game defensively. They're 100th in the country defensively. They've expended a lot of energy over the last couple weeks in their ball games. When you look at 2 weeks ago on the road at Georgia Tech, they were up in that game early. They fell behind by 23 points. They had to rally back to win that game in overtime. They take that back last week. They have a very physical, a very emotional win against NC State team. They were up early in that game. They had to hold off NC State. The score was tied 37-37, and Miami scored with 18 seconds left on the clock. They're led by their quarterback, Stephen Morris, who's having a very good season. He's thrown for 1,635 yards. He's thrown for 9 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He has, though, only completed 59.9% of his passes. So he's been a little bit of erratic in his completion percentage, and the running game wasn't that effective against NC State last week. They only rushed for 85 yards. So keep in mind that Miami, going into this game against Notre Dame, is going to have to rush the football against a very tough Notre Dame defense. They're ranked 3rd in the nation, only surrendering 9 points per game. And in order for Miami to have success against the Fighting Irish, they're going to have to use their running backs, Duke Johnson and Mike James, in the running game, and then work Stephen Morris in play action. They cannot afford to be one-dimensional going into this ball game. Otherwise, they will lose. They need to have a balanced attack, something that they didn't do last week against North Carolina State. They feasted off of 6 Wolfpack turnovers in that game in order to build a big lead. They cannot afford to do that this week against Notre Dame. They're going to need the running game, and whether they can do that is going to be a key question mark for Miami heading into this ball game. Defensively for Miami, they do get back linebacker Denzel Perryman. He's an emotional leader for this ball club. He was out the last couple of weeks. He does come back for this game and should add some emotional and physical depth to this Hurricane defense. But Miami has expended a lot of energy, and they are a little bit weak in run support. They did get burned 2 weeks ago against Georgia Tech. Their early loss against Kansas State, they surrendered a ton of yards rushing, and how will that fare against Notre Dame's massive offensive line will be a key factor heading into this ball game. Miami, Everett Golston, Brian Kelly has stated that Everett Golston will start this game. He is the starting quarterback for Notre Dame heading into this game. So the game plan for Al Golden and his defensive staff is going to have to be to shut down the running game of Notre Dame, force Everett Golston into the pocket, force him to make his reads. But Miami to date has been surrendering a ton of yards defensively. They surrendered a ton of yards to Georgia Tech, and they gave up 664 yards at home to NC State. They gave up 440 passing to Mike Glennon and 224 rushing to an average North Carolina State Wolfpack team. They're going to be going up against a very big offensive line in Notre Dame, and they're going to have to be able to shut down the run in order to be successful this week. So that's a key factor heading into this ball game. For the Fighting Irish, they're going with Everett Golston at quarterback. Look for Brian Kelly to use his running game and the heavy offensive line to wear down the Hurricanes. They've expended a lot of physical and emotional energy over the last couple of weeks, and look for Brian Kelly to sort of exploit that early, see if he can exploit that. Notre Dame is coming off a bye week. They should be fresh heading into this ball game, and that gives them another week to prepare both offensively and defensively for this Hurricane ball club. So how does that factor into this matchup for Brian Kelly and his offense and defensive staff heading into this game? It is on a neutral field, but Miami and Notre Dame both travel well in terms of fan support, so it should be a very strong and electric atmosphere for both teams. Look for Brian Kelly to use Theo Riddick and get Sierra Wood involved in both screens and the running game to open up things and play action. And Brian Kelly is probably going to keep a very conservative approach to see if he can wear down the front seven of Miami. I believe that that's the factor and the game plan going into this ball game, especially since when you look at it, if you've looked at the Miami Hurricanes over the last couple of weeks, physically they looked a little lethargic at the end of that NC State game when they jumped out to an early lead in both of the games against Georgia Tech and NC State. They surrendered those leads, they gave them back, and then they had to pull out in the victory in the end the last couple of weeks. So how does that carry over on the road on a neutral site against a very underrated offense and defensive lines for Notre Dame? They're ninth in the country. Still, I think that they should be a little bit higher. They should be 6 or 5, in my opinion, in terms of defensively, the way they've been playing. They have an SEC caliber front seven led by the front three of Notre Dame and Monty Te'o, that linebacker who is able to roam sideline to sideline. He creates a lot of mismatches for the Fighting Irish defensively, so keep an eye out for that. When you look for the Fighting Irish defensively, they're going to want to put pressure on Stephen Morris. He's only completing 59% of his passes. He has been erratic. He has thrown an interception over the last 3 games. He has thrown a pick. So how does that carry over to a defense that has created turnovers for Notre Dame? They made Denard Robinson a one-dimensional passer when they played them at home. They forced Denard Robinson into turnovers. To look for the same type of game plan out of Notre Dame against Stephen Morris. The running game right now, at least last week, wasn't going for Miami. They only ran for 85 yards. This is a defensive team in Notre Dame only surrendering 112 yards per rush. So how does that factor up? Miami's going to want to run the ball. Notre Dame's going to want to force Stephen Morris into his reads, force Miami into being one-dimensional, and will they have success doing that is going to be a key factor whether they get the W or not. When you look at both teams, I think it's very clear cut who the edge is. I think both offensively and defensively on the front lines for Notre Dame has a significant advantage for Notre Dame in this game. I think they're very underrated. I think that they are, at this point, a top 5 team. I think the bye week helps them game plan for the Hurricanes, and I think that the carryover effect of 2 emotional games for the Hurricanes finally takes its toll, and I'm looking for a dominant victory out of Notre Dame this week. I think they win easily 40-20 in Soldier Field. I think that defensively for the Hurricanes. They're surrendering 495 yards per game, and they're going up against a very stout offensive line in Notre Dame, and that's going to be a key mismatch heading into this game. They are, in terms of run support, a little bit weak. When you look at the Kansas State game, they surrendered a ton of yards to Colin Klein and that massive offensive line. I think it's the same sort of mismatch for Notre Dame, and I'm looking for a dominant Notre Dame victory, 40-20, as the Notre Dame Fighting Irish move to 5-0.